Hello, Screen Junkies. I'm Dan Murrell, host of Summer Movie Report on ScreenJunkies Plus, and this is the Screen Junkies spoiler review of X-Men Apocalypse. If you want to read my non-spoiler thoughts, you can check out my review live right now on ScreenJunkies.com. So, final warning, if you do not want to get spoiled on X-Men Apocalypse, tune out now. Otherwise, let's get to the review.
He always had 4 principal followers, disciples, protectors he would imbue with powers.
Like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
This guy looks like he really wants to cause some kind of apocalypse. X-Men Apocalypse is either the 9th, the 6th, or the 3rd film in the X-Men franchise, depending on how you decide to count it, and that's just one indication of how confused and messed up this franchise's timeline has gotten. X-Men Apocalypse is set 10 years after Days of Future Past, which was itself set 10 years after X-Men First Class, which means it's been 20 years since we first met James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Nicholas Hoult, and all of these new X-Men, which also makes me wonder what kind of mutant gene these X-Men have against aging. X-Men producers, please stop with the time jumps. I don't need the next X-Men movie to be set in 1993 where you make some kind of Jurassic Park reference. It's not needed, just make the movies. This time the X-Men are fighting the supervillain Apocalypse, who is so named because he wants to cause an apocalypse. Get it? Once again, we have the evil villain who wants to destroy the world, to purify the world, a lot like we saw in Age of Ultron last summer, and a lot like we've seen in so many other countless superhero movies. Every single shot of the destruction that you've seen in the trailers is in the movies, and that's it. This movie is called X-Men Apocalypse, and they had a chance to really bring something big and unexpected and new to the table, and it's the same thing that you've seen so many times before. It's really kind of just an annoyance. It should have been called X-Men Annoyance, because that's all Apocalypse really is at the end of the day. And the sad thing is that this movie had a great setup that really had me engaged for the first 45 minutes of the film. I really liked what they did with Apocalypse's backstory. I think they set him up as a really interesting villain. I liked the opening in ancient Egypt, and I liked what they did with Magneto. One of my big qualms going into the movie is why would Magneto kind of change sides depending on where we've seen him in this franchise and become one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? That Apocalypse found him at the lowest moment in his life. That worked for me, mainly because of Michael Fassbender and his performance. So for the first 45 minutes of this movie, I was digging it. I was really into it. And then the destruction starts and everything is rote. It's by the numbers. It's like they started writing 1/3 of an interesting movie and then went, and then some stuff happens. And then the end. And one of the movie's big problems is that it is, at times, completely tone deaf. The biggest example of the tone deaf nature of this movie comes with the Quicksilver Scene. Now, it was such a surprise and a delight in Days of Future Past. It was probably the best scene in that movie. And here, it's like Bryan Singer said, well, people liked it in this movie, so let's do it again and bigger in this movie. But he put it in the worst possible place when it comes at the destruction of Xavier's mansion, and it just fell flat for me because it was put in the wrong place in the movie. And that's so much of what this movie was. It was things just kind of put in because they felt like they were requirements without any real regard to the tone or where it fit into the movie. And that's why this movie feels so disjointed and disappointing to me. Something else that really annoyed me about this movie was an overabundance of just paying lip service to the comics and to the lore of the X-Men. Now, one of the big selling points of this movie was that Storm and Psylocke and Angel were going to be big parts of the movie. They were going to be 3 of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, and they were 3 of the most disappointing parts of the movie. There was absolutely no reason for them to be those characters. They weren't giving anything special to do. They weren't giving any character development to have. They may as well have been henchmen 1, 2, and 3. Angel is dispatched basically off camera with one fleeting mention. This is one of the 5 founding members of the X-Men in the comics. And Archangel is probably the most pivotal figure in the comic books to the Apocalypse story. And I'm not saying that you have to be completely slavish and faithful to the storyline of the comics. This is a movie and it should stand on its own. But it's the fact that they took these characters that mean so much to X-Men fans, gave them generic interchangeable roles, and then just kind of shuffled them off screen without any ceremony. Psylocke literally just kind of walks out of the movie. This is also the case with Jubilee, who's being featured in the viral marketing for this movie. And another big thing that they're pushing is like, Jubilee is finally gonna get her shot in X-Men Apocalypse. I don't think they use her name once. If they do, they certainly don't use it twice. And not one time does she use her mutant powers, does she do anything other than go to the mall, which we've already seen, she did that in the X-Men animated series, and get knocked unconscious. That's it. When you put so much anticipation to the appearance of these characters and then do nothing with them, it seems like a misstep to me because you've set people up to expect so much more. Now let's talk Wolverine real quick. A reveal that I wish they'd save for the movie and not put in the third trailer because I intentionally didn't want to know if Wolverine was in this movie, but he is indeed, except he's Weapon X. And it is so cool to see the Weapon X Wolverine on screen in a movie other than X-Men Origins Wolverine, which was an absolute abomination. And yes, the action scene with Weapon X in the bunker is 10 times better than any bit of X-Men Origins Wolverine. It's maybe the best Wolverine action sequence ever put to film in any of the other movies, and it is completely unnecessary to this particular movie. Yes, it's cool. Yes, viewed on its own, it is a great Wolverine action sequence, but it is only there in service to the later movies. And that's another problem that I have with this movie, is even the fight against Apocalypse seems like it is done to set up a Phoenix storyline later on. Nothing in this movie has any consequence, has any weight, it has no lasting impact. Everybody ends this movie in exactly the same spot where they began, and that's my biggest problem with X-Men Apocalypse. Is it a terrible movie? No, it's not a terrible movie, but it is completely empty. It has no lasting meaning or impact. It doesn't tell us or show us anything new. It doesn't bring anything new to the franchise. It's almost like this movie could be wiped away and it wouldn't change a thing in the X-Men mythology. And that's just not good enough these days. But despite these disappointments, there were some things that I absolutely liked. First of all, Michael Fassbender is a great actor, and he continues to really bring it in his performance as Magneto, particularly in the first hour of the film. I like how his Magneto is conflicted. I just wish that the movie would do more with that conflict, other than always bringing him full circle back around to being friends with Xavier. Secondly, taken apart from the movie and apart from their context, the Quicksilver sequence and the Wolverine sequence are both really strong, great action sequences. They're gonna make great standalone YouTube clips one day. My problem is that their placement in the movie doesn't make any sense, and they both stop the movie dead in its tracks to get these obligatory characters incorporated into the film. I also liked Nightcrawler. Much like in X-Men 2, they do a very good job of showcasing his powers, the advantages and the disadvantages of his powers, and I hope to see more of him in future movies. Oscar Isaac also did well with what they gave him as Apocalypse. He certainly spouted the "I'm gonna destroy the world" dialogue and the 18 variations of "I'm gonna destroy the world" dialogue that they gave him very forcefully and very strongly. He brought a weight to that character, he brought a menace to that character, but the movie just didn't know what to do with that character, and that's the main problem with Apocalypse. He was treated as just a generic villain. He was defeated by the power of love, essentially, in the same rubble field that Ronan the Accuser was defeated on in Guardians of the Galaxy. I think if you put the ending sequence of these two movies side by side, they'd be shockingly similar. I think Oscar Isaac could have had a great villain turn as Apocalypse, but the movie didn't give him enough to do, and he just seems like a placeholder. As a matter of fact, almost every performance in this movie is really good, but the problem is that it's not in service to anything. X-Men Apocalypse doesn't bring anything new to the table. It's the same generic action, it's the same generic villain plot, it's the same generic superhero stuff that we've seen so many times before. And I'm afraid that the X-Men franchise, which has been so strong lately, is starting to slide back down again. And Fox, you've already rebooted the timeline once, and you don't get another mulligan. They made so many things right with Days of Future Past, but I think that the X-Men are starting to repeat the mistakes of the past, and that might be the real apocalypse for the X-Men franchise. But what did you think? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Am I being too harsh? Let me know in the comments section below. I'd love to hear what you think. Also, be sure to check out Summer Movie Report every week on ScreenJunkies Plus, where we break down movies like X-Men Apocalypse, all the big releases of the summer, and keep you informed about what to see in theaters coming up. I'm Dan Murrell. Thank you for watching the ScreenJunkies spoiler review of X-Men Apocalypse. Join us next time. For the first time ever, movies are being made for comic book fans of all ages, of all tastes. And instead of letting our differences divide us, I think we should get together and celebrate this phenomenal time that we're living in.